Thank you all very, very much for joining us. We're excited to have a conversation today. It's, as you can see on the screen, more or less for your money. It's the case for customizable portions. And myself as a representative of Refed, but also as an 18+ year career in the restaurant industry prior to that, I'm super fascinated with this topic and the opportunity that customizable portions can offer for food businesses to both be more profitable, attract more customers, but also reduce their food waste. It's a triple win for everyone. And the underlying stat here is that 70% of restaurant waste comes from what diners have on their plates. It's the things that we send back to the kitchen. Hopefully the leftovers that you take home and eat, but not everyone does that. We'll get into that a little bit later. And so it's a very exciting topic for us to dig into today. And we're going to talk for a few minutes about kind of things that are going at Refed. I am Sarah Burnett. I am the executive director here at Refed. And for those that don't know much about Refed, I'll give you the very top line high overview of that. We're a US-based nonprofit, and we are focused solely on working with stakeholders across the food system to reduce food waste. That means food businesses, funders, solution providers, policymakers, and so many more. We're trying to give them the information, the insights, and the solutions that they need to reduce waste across a really complicated food system. And frankly, food waste is an issue that happens from farm all the way to landfill. In particular, there is a lot of waste that happens at the restaurant and food service level as well, which we're going to be focusing in on today. And a couple things that are going on in Refed's world that I want you to be aware of. First off, there is a new learning lab coming soon. Please register. These learning labs are opportunities for you to connect with other folks who are looking to learn about the food waste movement and how they can take action, and they're targeted at very specific stakeholders. This first one is about folks who are building, piloting, or scaling a food waste solution. And it's really about what is happening in food waste innovation in 2026 and beyond, and what's the outlook to help inform your plans. And for us, what we want to see is tons and tons and tons of solutions scale. Food waste is one of the most unique issues, and that is completely solvable, but it is completely solvable with amazing innovators that are starting to scale. And so this is going to be a great webinar. Please join the team and share it with your colleagues as well. The next webinar that I want to share a little bit about is our US Food Waste Pact webinar that is coming up in early March. Our US Food Waste Pact is a pre-competitive coalition of food businesses, from food manufacturers to food service to retailers. And these are all organizations that are working together to reduce waste. You're not going to want to miss this and get updates on the progress that they've made over the past year. Both retailers and food service who are doing incredible work to reduce waste. And they influence not only their own direct operations, but those upstream and downstream. So make sure to check that out. And then last but absolutely not least, the Food Waste Solutions Summit is coming in Charlotte. And we are so excited to have folks join us on May 19th through the 21st. This is the preeminent place to be. Whatever your connection to food waste, there's going to be researchers, policymakers, food recovery organizations, AI tech innovators who are trying to track and reduce waste. There's something for everyone here. And what we really pride ourselves on is that everyone comes out of this with a new action, something that is actionable and a new change that they can do. And we're really excited to host this in Charlotte. I will just say this is a little bit of a FOMO. We did sell out last year, and we do have some tickets available right now. So if you are planning on going, I would grab it now. We are anticipating that we are going to sell out again this year. Now with that, I am going to jump right into the topic we have at hand. And before I'm joined by a really great panel of experts, some incredible leaders, and get into actually two research projects that we're going to dive in today, I want to give you a little bit of context on both food waste, but also just a quick snapshot on each of those studies. First off, customizable portions. Portion customization in general, we're going to dig into a couple examples of that and what are some great practices there, but ultimately, what does this mean to it? It means giving people more options about how much food they're served. It can be everything from half-size sandwiches to you pick twos to build your owns to offering the opportunity to not have a side option with your center of plate entree. So there's so many different ways that folks can customize, and we're going to dig into that a little bit today. As I said at the top, plate waste represents 70% of restaurant food waste. A lot of focus goes on back of house food waste and what's happening with our operators in terms of how can they, prep more appropriately, prep the right items, the right quantities, and that's really important. But we want to shift the conversation today and really focus what's actually going on the plate and what's not being consumed. And ultimately, what these two cases or these two studies go together is that they build this amazing business case for restaurant owners and operators to offer customizable portions. Sometimes there's hesitancy to this, and we'll general population and those infamous GLP-1 users. So really exciting conversation that we're going to have today. Two things that I do want to say really quickly about the two studies is there's two separate studies that this is based on. One is an incredible partner with Data Essential and that really talked to consumers and tried to understand how do they feel about portions? How do they feel about leftovers? And a couple standout insights that just keep popping up in the back of my head. One is that portion sizes that are offered today don't always meet consumer expectations. One really interesting stat is that nearly half of consumers say that they were surprised by the size of their meal in the last month. And a third of them said, hey, I wish that it was smaller. It's a really interesting stat. The second is that doggy bags aren't the norm for everybody. I will raise my hand and say I am the leftover eater in my house. I love doggy bags. Not everyone does. In fact, 25% of consumers say that they always leave food on their plate. That's a huge opportunity for both restaurants as well as consumers. There is also this big business opportunity, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a trade-off. Getting into the Data Essentials research, scan that QR code, look into it, dig into it. It's really interesting. Consumers are saying they're willing to pay a little bit more for the right-sized portion. So it doesn't have to be a complete trade-off for the business. You can still get some incremental dollars even at a smaller portion size. And then the last one that I can't help but call out is that portion options could be attracting consumers. We know we've been in this snack trend for many years, but ultimately what we're seeing now is Gen Pop in general is saying, I'm really interested in different portion sizes. I'm looking for customization. I want to own that. And so I want to have control over the portion size. In fact, 59% of Gen Pop says, I'm more likely to visit if you have customizable portions. And then the second piece is 73% of GLP-1 users said they would be likely to visit. And so really interesting for restaurants to consider what that means for their business and opportunity to attract guests. And then the second study was customizable portions. And this is a very interesting look at front of house food waste. What I said before, back of house waste is often the focus of restaurant operators, and they are doing great work there. We've seen lots and lots of reductions. But in terms of front of house waste, there's not as much focus. And they are going to be dropping into the chat later a kind of embargoed early look at that research. It's just getting ready to publish. So please don't share it beyond that, but they are giving you a sneak peek. And I think what's really interesting about it is insights from their interviews, their surveys, and their real world measurement shows that there is a clear opportunity for businesses, again, to improve their margins overall, to decrease labor costs overall, and so much more when we look at and understand what's being wasted front of house and use that to optimize your business model. So super exciting research. I encourage you to look at both of those studies and get more info as you dig into that. But today we're going to have a conversation about it. So I'm going to stop talking and listen to my really talented team who is here to talk. Hui, who is from Data Essentials, he's a trendologist and insights manager for them, is going to speak to us about that data essential work and what's the consumer saying about portions and customization. Abby is here from the Culinary Institute of America, is an incredible researcher, scientist, and leads strategic work all around health and nutrition at the Culinary Institute. Gina, who is here from the Earth Commons School at Georgetown and was a PI on this work. And then Lori Ferry, who is here representing the McDonough School of Business at Georgetown, as well as the Portion Balance Coalition. So we have a really interesting perspectives from the team, and we're really excited to just dive into the conversation. With that, I welcome everybody to join me. Great. Hi, all. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello.
It's to be here.
Thanks, Sarah.
Hi, I'm so excited to have each one of you. Before we jump in, it's interesting, this group of folks. We have, this trendologist, you really understand the mind of the consumer. Abby, you have a lens of both wanting to, move forward in terms of more sustainable, healthy diets, but you have the chef perspective at the Culinary Institute. And then Gina and Laura, you both have unique perspectives from your places at Georgetown and the research that you've done. I would love to hear just like, how does your work day to day relate to food waste? How do you come to this issue? Hui, I'll start with you.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much again for giving us the opportunity to partner on such an amazing study. I've been holding off on sharing a lot of insights that we found since I think last August, and so now it's great that we can finally get to share this information with the world. I think for me, my bread and butter is consumer behavior and understanding the consumer mindset, and that changes very regularly. And I'd argue that, with the world changing constantly, consumer priorities are also changing so much. And understanding just a little bit more about how people gain control throughout their lives, especially when it comes to the decisions away from home, I think really helps us understand how to make decisions outside of the home, in the home, what they eat, where they eat from. And over the past year, we've seen a lot of ways that consumers try to wrest control out of all of the different factors in their lives. And portion size and customizability is just one of those places where consumers are increasingly looking to make sure that their diet really aligns with their needs, physical or mental. So I think that's really where all of my work lines up with what we're studying here.
Great. Abby, over to you.
Yeah, I can jump in from the culinary and food service operations perspective. Food waste is very present, and it's it's visible, it's daily on the minds of people back of house and of the operators, seeing both front and back of house waste. And I think that it is easier, as you said, Sarah, for people to identify and focus on back of house waste, resizing production, and really looking at that. But again, and we can talk about this with our research a little later too, but there's just this big opportunity and maybe perhaps a blind spot thus far within the culinary and food service industry to not pay as much attention to when the plates go out, what happens to the food. And with rising food costs, and just more companies focusing on sustainability efforts, I think that there's this really interesting opportunity that we're trying to uncover here when it comes to looking at plate waste and portion sizes that can really benefit the operators who want to do the right thing and don't want to see great food that they're procuring and preparing go to waste.
Gina, over to you.
Thanks. Really interesting and great question. Thanks, Sarah. I think I come from a different angle than a lot of our other panelists, and I'm an environmental scientist, and much of my work has taken place outside the U.S. borders in natural resource management, environmental management. And it transitioned about 15 years ago, where I realized that it wasn't so much managing the resources, but the impact of people on those resources. And one of the greatest impacts was waste. And I was fortunate enough to work with a fantastic company, group of engineers, environmental scientists like myself. And we won a huge award to work in 10 different countries around the world. And that was on Clean Cities, Blue Oceans. And what our main focus was to sort of get the whole, how we can reduce waste. And the greatest percentage of that waste was organics, 60% organics. We brought that back to the States, and I'm now at Georgetown. And one of the biggest issues were educators. And one of the biggest issues is students are very interested. They interact with food every single day. And so this project on customize and portions in restaurants opened up a great opportunity for our students to get involved, to get hands-on experience. And I think, and the more we got involved, the more interest, as you were saying previously, Sarah, it became, and I think our students did an incredible job kind of throughout this project of understanding food waste in the restaurant sector. And it's a small sector, but waste is huge and massive. And we're attacking a very, very important part of it in the US. So anyway, sorry.
That's great, Gina. And yeah, I mean, to your point, I just will double down on folks are kind of shocked to find out that the number one item in landfills is food waste.
Yeah.
So, and with that, Laura, though, I will turn it over to you, who has a very interesting perspective, especially from the Portion Balance Coalition, and how food waste intersects actually with multiple different issues, including health and diet.
Right. So, hello, everyone. I'm Laura Ferry. I'm the Senior Director at the Portion Balance Coalition at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. And our coalition brings together leaders from the food system across multi-sector, so food companies, food service, nonprofits, and academics, to focus on bite-sized portions that support health and reduce waste and make sense for business. Everything that we're doing is rooted in taking a look at it through the business lens, in addition to the scientific lens. And we are very interested in trying to find solutions that address food waste, that also give the restaurant sector options to reduce costs while also managing customer expectations. And trying to find that common ground there and that intersection is really what we were aiming for in this research. And it's been a really interesting process. We've learned a lot, and I won't give away too much in my answer to that question, because I know we're going to dive a little bit into the research itself. So very excited to be here and very excited to be working with such a great team on this work.
Great. Thank you all. Before we dive deep into the actual research, and I'm going to start with Hui, but before I do that, Abby, I would love to know from your perspective, like we continue to use this term customizable portions. What would you say, because you have the culinarian's perspective, like what do we mean by customizable portions? Any cool or interesting examples that you would share that you're seeing out in the marketplace?
Sure. Yeah. I would say from a culinary and food service operator perspective, customizable portions is really a menu strategy that centers around consumer choice. And it shifts away from focusing on fixed portions in your menu mix. And it offers diners more control over meal sizes and components. And you kind of identified that in your slide. The way that this shows up now from, in restaurants and in food service environments, it might be tiered pricing or tiered sizing, offering more multiple portion options for the same dish. So like a regular or a share size portion, creating more optional components to a meal. So you could order a sandwich a la carte, and maybe the sides that tend to be more default bundles like fries or potatoes might be optional, and you can allow a guest to choose. And then more flexible formats, build your own formats or half-size portions, or I saw in the chat a smaller kid-size meal that's actually marketed with different language to identify that it's actually just a right-sized adult portion. And again, from a culinary perspective, I think this works because it's a low risk. A way to look at these portion options is also low risk margin management. So it can really help improve margins from a strategy perspective. And I think that's really critical in restaurants. There's a very small, tight margin already. And this is a very great opportunity that both looks at minimizing food waste, but improving margins.
That's great. And Abby, I just have to throw in my favorite is the tapas. Just,
exactly.
if you just
right.
try a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and what a great way just to provide that opportunity. And people love, and from the culinary perspective, I have to say, people love trying different things and different tastes. That brings so much joy if you're eating out. And it doesn't have to be a lot of something to provide people that experience, right? So tapas is a great example.
Yeah, and I think underlying all of this is also underneath that choice is about giving customers to make them feel empowered, make them feel positive, still give them what they want, which is the food they love. And so that's what's really exciting about what customization can do for you. With that, I'm going to dig in. The data from the study shows that 60% of consumers are more likely to visit. And what does that exactly mean? Does that mean that if you do this tomorrow, 6 out of 10 people are going to come to your restaurant? Or what does this actually mean for us? How should we interpret that?
This is a great question, and thank you so much for asking, because I do think that like this, nearly 60% stat feels like the marquee stat from this report. I've been eager to share that stat with a lot of people, so it's great to get the opportunity to dig deeper here. Really, it doesn't mean that, tomorrow 6 out of 10 people will automatically switch restaurants, or that every time they're faced with a decision on where to go, that like 6 out of 10 people will immediately switch to a restaurant that offers customizable portions. But how to really interpret the stat is really that customizability becomes a really important point of differentiation in a crowded marketplace with so many different operators trying to attract guests whose budgets are shrinking and getting tighter and tighter than ever, and who are becoming more discerning with where they're choosing to spend their dollars. So it's more about like being more top of mind, standing out among the marketplace, letting your consumers know that this is something that you're able to provide for them, an experience that is not only tasty and delicious and affordable, but also able to be catered to their needs and what exactly they're looking for in a dining experience. So it's really about like not just in controlling portion size or controlling your menu, but also, increasing loyalty and relevance and standing out among your diners. So that's really more about competitive advantage, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we always had this visual, and I've always thought about it this way, is we all have gone down that strip where you have all the restaurants on both sides of the street. And the question is, what's going to make you walk past your competitor and come into mine? Like walk that one, maybe extra block. And that's that likelihood to, like getting into the consideration, likely to potentially come in is like, it's that competitive advantage to get them to walk those few extra steps to come into your restaurant versus another.
Right, and not to mention now all of the off-premise occasions too. Like you're browsing through all of these different like names and pictures on an app, right? How are you going to pop up on a single person's phone screen? Anything can really help you stand out.
Yep, very, very true. Well, there was a lot of other interesting stats in this, and I know we could talk all day about it, but what else stood out to you? What else was the things that you were like, that is really interesting, or I really want people to know about this?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of eye-opening takeaways in this report, and we spent a lot of time sort of refining them and making sure that they're most relevant to all of our operators and readers of this report. But I think all of them sort of point to a really central theme that was kind of not a surprise to me, but a really eye-opening revelation that portion size is a bigger source of friction in people's daily lives than we tend to realize, right? You mentioned all of the stats from the report at the beginning, how people are frequently surprised by how big a restaurant meal was, or how often people eat past the point of fullness just to avoid wasting food, or how they leave food on the plate and not take the doggy bag home. All of these different ways in which consumers are dining out and getting a suboptimal experience over time can really contribute to a really warped perspective about, of what good restaurant dining can be. And so I think even though we as an industry often assume that bigger is better, especially when the value conversation becomes more prescient in people's minds, I don't think that's always the case in practice. And our study really delves into all of the different ways in which that sort of manifests, right? And so I think really the standout here is that portion size is not just about what's on your plate, but it really represents missed opportunities for both consumer satisfaction and revenue, right? I think I am not always native or not always, a resident in the land of sustainability research or the land of food waste, but I think outside of that, or in a lot of people's minds, I think, smaller portion sizes or being more tight on values, I think has a really strange connotation of taking things away from people, or it's limiting choices, or it's limiting what people can do, or how much people can eat. And I think our research really shows that it doesn't have to be that way, or that's really a misconception. that you can expand portion choices, that a smaller portion can give people more of what they want rather than less. And I think that's kind of really the main takeaway that all of our insights and all of our questions point to altogether.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, giving you more, not giving you less. And I also thought it was really interesting. While we're saying there's an opportunity, there's also some interesting in this reported kind of, for lack of a better term, coping mechanisms that folks are using today.
Right.
Like they're sharing, they're doing different things to compensate for maybe portion sizes that aren't matching exactly their appetite today.
Mhm.
I want to ask you one question that's a little bit outside of script, but we in general, like restaurant dining in general, like obviously everybody's talking about food prices, the cost of eating out and the cost at retail. Like, how is restaurant traffic in general doing? Like, people are still very frequently going and dining out, right?
Yeah, I think out of all of the different industries that could have been affected by, the inflation prices over the last couple of years, all of the different economic crises and challenges that are happening, it has been a surprise to us as an industry to see that restaurant dining has remained relatively resilient over the past several years, despite these economic challenges. I wouldn't say that everything is super thriving. I'm not saying that people are rushing to restaurants every single day, but more often than not, we are surprised by how often people still incorporate restaurant dining into their everyday lives and make time for it and make space in their budgets for it, as whether that's a regular part of their lives or an affordable luxury, a little treat, a moment that helps them, brighten up their day despite all of the different things that they're navigating in their lives. So, yeah, there's still a really strong place for restaurant dining, even despite all of the pricing and the inflation conversation.
Yeah. Well, and there is one one cohort who is dining out more frequently, right? And that is
Yeah.
GLP-1 users, which is really interesting. And any differences in the study that you would just call out? Because we did look at, a small slice of GLP-1 users, which as most people know, are growing in usage across the US for a lot of different health concerns. So what are you seeing in this study that was interesting around them?
Yeah, we actually isolated that subgroup and dedicated a significant chunk of the report to examining their habits. And what was a surprise to me is that when I thought about GLP-1 users, when they first emerged in the market, I was thinking that their reduced appetite and all of the different physiological changes happening with them would cause them to eat out less or really restrict their diet, but it's really not the case. We're actually seeing that GLP-1 users are an extremely engaged audience in food service, and they're much more invested in portion flexibility than the average consumer, right? And there could be many things. They dine out more frequently than non-users, whether to have the experience and not order as much food in volume, or ordering regular meals and not finishing them, or they could split a regular portion into 2.5 or later, or order multiple meals that are exactly catered to the nutritional needs so that they don't have to figure out how to do that at home. For all of these different use cases, restaurants and food service have a really strong place in GLP-1 users' lives. But because of their physiological changes and needs, they also encounter a lot more of the friction and the coping mechanisms that we identified, right? They are more likely to say that portions are typically too big. They're more likely to leave food behind. They're more likely to share meals or skip items altogether. And they're also more likely to take leftovers home. And I think the final thing really is that 60% stat that we mentioned earlier, that is among the average Gen Pop consumer. But for GLP-1 users, that's 73% of them who say that a restaurant that offers more customizable portions could incentivize them to choose that restaurant more. So it's not just a nice to have for this group. It's really a part and parcel of how they think about ordering and eating away from home.
That's fascinating and huge business opportunity, right? Really interesting for restaurants to look at.
Totally.
And I want to just take a shift and just go really quickly through what we call Project Customize, our work with Georgetown and the Culinary Institute, MCURC, with the team there, and say, just Gina, I'm going to put it over to you to start with, of like, what was this research? Like, what were you aiming to figure out? And what did it entail overall? Because I know it was a multi-phased project.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And really, I also welcome Abby as well as Laura to dive in here. I think it's a really, it's an exciting project to think about food, think about portions. And we had a great opportunity where we actually divided up the study where we conducted, and it was conducted, I should say this, between August 2024 through September 2025. And the study it combined 11 expert interviews. And in the report that you see that's embargoed, it goes into great detail about the study, the survey questions. We really wanted to be transparent in everything that we did. So then we did a desktop analysis of 70 menus, including the leading 8 of the 10 top chains in America. And then we developed 20 survey respondents from commercial and non-commercial scaled food service operations. And then how do we ground truth this information that we got from doing the analysis on the menus, doing the expert interviews, to doing the surveys? And that was in the audits itself, where we actually went we asked quite a few restaurants, but we were so gracious and both so thankful that we were able to get 4 diverse types of restaurants, formats, from build your own to in-house casuals to plant-based and to tavern and bar food. And so we were able to sort of look, and what we really want to do is understand trends in front of house food waste, because then we realized that the majority, as you were saying, Sarah, majority of restaurant service industry providers, they know what's happening in back of house. And that was kind of proven through the surveys, the questionnaires, but what is an unknown, as what Abby was saying, what's going on in the front of house. And really we started to dig deep there, and so we were able to go to 4 popular, very lovely, wonderful restaurants that they opened their doors, and we designed a methodology that would work for them. We realized that restaurants, it might be different in other parts of the states, but here in DC with the restaurant sector, and has been hit quite hard for everything that's been happening. And we were just very gracious to them. And the restaurants that we did go to were anonymous. We said, we're just really wanting to understand the trends and the patterns and what people leave on their plates when they dump it into the trash cans. So I had an incredible, great group of students, and we, our audit was over 3 days, and this can be expanded significantly. But we didn't want to put too much the onus and a lot of stress and pressure on the restaurants, because we did have a very specific time that we picked it up and what we did. But then we brought it back to the lab. We divided it up, we weighed it, we realized, and then we brought in the business school. Our business school students did an incredible job, looked at menus, looked at what the patterns were, looked at, if it was starch, fruit, desserts, and all that. And so we started to really get these trends and go into detail. And it was really great, some of those results that we got. And we can go into that, but let me kind of hand it over to Abby or to Laura.
I'll just weigh in on something that really the research intended to look at that intersection of portion customization and food waste reduction in these retail food service settings. And I see a note in the chat as well that, interested in real life case studies, shifting to more flexible portion options. I do want to say that we pivoted in the midst of this project, that recognizing that there wasn't yet the mindset that there was an opportunity to test customizable portions. So we really intended initially to pilot some customizable portion options and measure the impact of that in real world settings. And what we found was that, as I mentioned before, it might be perhaps a bit of a blind spot, that there's this consumer interest and opportunity as well as an opportunity to improve profit margins. And so the steps that Gina laid out leading up to that plate waste audit was really to be able to build the business case to say that there is a need and there is an opportunity to right-size portions to reduce food waste and improve profit margins. And maybe I'll just pass to Laura to speak to that as well.
I think everybody's pretty much covered it, but I would like to say that what we did find was that when flexibility was built into the menu or that concept, whether through optional sides, multiple sizes, or mix and match formats, less food was left behind. And that's why customization makes good business sense. It reduces waste, supports cost management, and responds to real customer demand without changing or diminishing the experience for the customer. So I just thought that was a really interesting takeaway from this. And so I'll toss this back over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting study and multiple phases intentionally looking to get a lot of different perspectives. And so what you'll see too, I know a couple folks in the chat, there was a question, for example, around the experience of a person who's not looking for an experience. When we look at these restaurants overall, the majority of this cohort was QSR, fast casual. It was not fine dining where I'm in an extended. Well, there were some casual dining included as well, but we weren't looking for kind of that high-end experience. We were looking for the everyday experience for folks across the country. But I just, on this research overall, I would love to hear Abby, Gina, Laura, like, what's the top what are the top takeaways? You know, 3 or 4 things that you're like, these are the things that we really learned that were really fascinating, because I know there was a lot of learning across all of those phases, but what's the top ones?
I'll share like top 2 and then maybe pass it over. For me, I felt it was really interesting that only 20% of the businesses that we surveyed were actually measuring plate waste, either due to labor constraints, but not really necessarily seeing the opportunity to look at cost savings from that perspective. And you know, customizable portions in the menu analysis and in the waste audit remained fairly underutilized thus far, with only 25% of restaurant chains offering reduced or flexible portion options, despite this big opportunity space for the GLP-1 users changing just habits. Excuse me. And I think there were some things identified specifically about which type of things were wasted, but maybe I'll pass to Gina for that.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. So there were really interesting findings, and you know, we sort of had in the report, you'll see key terms, you know, from a composite entry, which was sort of a meal in itself, starches, protein, dessert, condiments, dips, vegetables, dairy, and fruit. So we kind of really did go into detail, and we separated and weighed all those types of food out. I think that was really, and we were able to then therefore develop those trends and patterns from that. And, you know, kind of some of the key findings you asked, Sarah, is that portion sizes do drive waste. It was really interesting to see that starches and size dominated waste. So the sides, if like we saw a lot of, you know, if it was fruit or if it was fries, that was what was wasted. And then we, you know, this is more back of house, but some menus, when we looked at the menus for each of these restaurants, some menu items never sold. And so we were able to give that feedback to the restaurant saying, hey, you might want to look at these items because obviously it could be spoilage, not so much in the front of house, but in the back of house. So I felt, you know, I'm kind of I have to say this, I'm a birder and I'm an observational person. And you know, what we did was not rocket science, but it was really important because what we were doing is observing, putting it in substantial science or scientific evidence by weighing and doing the analysis. But we were observing trends and patterns. What And I think restaurants can do that is by working with the employees. And that's kind of one of my take homes is your employees are so important. They're observing every single day. So get them involved. Get them to observe what's going in because they can see, boom, it's potatoes, or boom, it's these expensive eggs, or boom, it's, and I think but get them involved, get them engaged. And I could even see that from the excitement of the students that we worked with, that we got dirty and we separated. And the employee, if you can, and I think the restaurants themselves, it's easier said than done, all this is, but try to set goals. And then we have in the report some very sort of takeaways that will help you. For example, if you set a goal, you got to have the tools for the employees to be able to dish out and measurable tools and they can be color coded. So there's kind of tricks of the trade that we also put in the report.
That's great, Gina. And I think playing off of the takeaways that both you and Abby said, especially around one, front of house waste can be measured, and it doesn't have to be rocket science. It can be a simple manual process. It reminds me of something that I know Abby is very familiar with this person, but I quote him all the time, Chef Matthew Ward from University of North Texas. And this story that he shares of he was looking to reduce food waste in his operations. And one of the best solutions that they found was from their dishwasher, who came to him and said, I have an idea. And he said, this is what I'm seeing. And this is the time of day. And this is what we could do to change it. And those insights from someone who was just looking at what was wasted was transformational for his operation. And I always think about that of, it doesn't have to be the most complicated solution or glamorous, but sometimes it's just making sure that we're digging in literally, taking a close look, and then we're getting feedback from all those people who are seeing it day in, day out. So Laura, any last takeaways? And then if not, I want to talk really quickly about barriers before we we have a lot of Q&A. If you have extra questions, please do pop them in the Q&A. But Laura, any other takeaways you want to make sure we share?
I would like to just say that, we're all here because we want to reduce food waste. And we have to have a business case that goes along with making these changes. So I think that's the outcome of the research. Really, those recommendations, I think we're really on the right track and are doable. It's not just about reducing portion size. It's about creating options for people and being more flexible with the customer. So it can work, and it's a very exciting opportunity, I think, for restaurants to take advantage of, particularly in the GLP-1 era. So thank you very much, everyone.
And I know that, obviously we came to this and we had a lot of restaurants who were engaged. We also had great consumer engagement on the Study with Data Essentials. But one thing that we always want to think about is, this seems like a great opportunity. Why are not more folks taking advantage of this today? So there's obviously has to be some barriers to executing this. And so want to just be honest about what we know about potential barriers to implementing some of these. And maybe I'll start with you, just because you work with restaurants on strategies all day. Why do you think this is an area where, while we don't see, I would not call it resistance at all, we see like slower adoption over time, and we're hoping obviously for some increased momentum, but why do you think this is an area where people haven't dug in deeply just yet?
Yeah, I think that is a tough question with many different answers, but I do think that I would say that right now this is a moment with the rise in the conversation about value and the really interesting trends in health and wellness and all of these different consumer priorities. I think operators are really inundated with things to recalibrate and change. And it's not an easy decision to make. Because it kind of blows up your entire back of house operation, and then you have to make a lot of different subtle changes, larger changes. I think operators need more reassurance that consumers will notice and understand and appreciate these strategies that they might have to implement in order to make it work. I think Data Central has done a lot of different work with the CIA and also Food for Climate League. I'll shout them here too. That studies the disconnect between what operators assume consumers want and what they really, really want, especially when it comes to things like healthfulness and sustainability and portion size. And I think really bridging that gap and really letting operators know that this is really what consumers want and this is profitable and it will come back in a good way and really pay back the dividends. I think bridging that disconnect will be a really important way for this conversation to move forward. But I'll turn it over to everyone else to also chime in about barriers.
Abby, any perspective just from the restaurant operator perspective that you could give?
Yeah, I think that there's a perceived resistance, or there is resistance because of a perceived loss of potential profit of offering smaller portions. And I think that that's a barrier, right? Whereas if they think that by, and in some cases, they may also conflate it with shrinkflation, which is something that many restaurants and food service providers want to avoid, offering the same type of option, just slightly smaller for the same price. That's not what we're presenting here with the customizable portion opportunity. It's flexible opportunities. So what I think that is a barrier that the research here shows how to overcome this barrier is that customers are more willing. You'll probably get more customers or more frequency of a customer if you have that flexibility of portion options instead of a fixed portion size that may not meet their needs. And maybe they go once, but they don't come back because it was too much and they didn't enjoy that experience. So I think that may be a barrier in the perception of potential loss of profit, when indeed it could be looked at as improved margin strategy that could ensure that there's maintained profitability.
Yep. Music to a restaurant operator's ears, margin optimization. Love that. I'm going to go to a couple questions from the audience. Laura, the first one I'm going to ask is kind of tangential to this, but I think is interesting to think about, which is, do you know of, and I can offer some commentary from my past life as well, of like, was the relationship between publishing calorie counts and customer satisfaction ever researched or understood? Because we do know that lower calorie count doesn't always mean a smaller portion, but it can be related. So anything that you can think of in terms of like calorie counts, did posting those help with customer satisfaction overall? Do you know?
I don't have the research on that, so I don't want to claim that I have a definitive answer, but I do know that overall that having calorie counts on menus has been a very positive thing for a lot of folks. Other folks don't. It depends on the demographic and the type of restaurant, etc. Other folks are not even absorbing that information. So really, you can actually, I think, address through calorie count, of course, the serving size and all of those important things, but having that flexibility and letting people choose. You know, as Gina was saying, the big surprise was carbs being thrown out. I mean, I love carbs. I can't imagine throwing that part of my plate out, but that was really what we saw. So if you make those types of options, or make them options for people to choose, and that gets on into the customization piece, there's a lot more flexibility for, I think, both the restaurant operator and certainly the customer. So there is a study coming on transparency in terms of information disclosed to the customer, and our restaurants doing a good job of communicating that. That I'll be happy to update you on and send that information to the group as it becomes available.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I know that calorie counts are always very difficult, and I can just say from my past work in the restaurant industry, including putting calorie counts on menus, is that I've always been a strong advocate for is the challenges you're spending from your nutritional wallet every day, every week, every month. And so while you might choose to have that indulgent item at a restaurant today, you might mean that you might be spending a little bit less of your nutritional wallet later today on your snack or on your dinner. So it's really hard to actually study the impact of those overall, because we make, these food choices throughout our day and throughout the month, week, and year. So it is a tough one to study. One quick question that I think maybe you might have a good handle on. Any idea of, in general, how many folks are utilizing GLP-1s today? Like general sense?
Yeah, for this specific study, we had around 8% of consumers who say that they're currently actively using GLP-1s, and I think an additional 17% who said they were maybe interested in doing so in the future. That number has not shifted significantly since we conducted that study in August, but I know that with, in 2026, I do think that with the emergence of pill forms, and increased access to different ways that people are getting GLP-1s, I think we're probably going to see that number go up because it may become more accessible. Because, in previous years, even if you wanted to take it, it may not be easiest to find or the cheapest option. But the more they proliferate in the market, the more we'll find that GLP-1s will become an even larger portion of the demographic.
Yeah, and if you're looking at 8% of the market, that's a huge, for a restaurant, you're thinking that's a really big opportunity compared to some other kind of cohorts or kind of diets and different choices, food choices that folks make. There's a question here about, were the surveyed restaurants asked about donating any edible surplus food from back of house? I don't believe so, but Gina, there was no donation questions. If not, I'll comment just in general from ReFed's perspective.
There were ones, are you engaged or involved with an NGO or public service institution that takes back of house food? We did that. We did ask that question in our questionnaire, and very few, might have been one one restaurant that actually said yes, they do belong to a group. I'm not going to mention who, the NGO that provides food that is either going to be spoiled but not quite spoiled, or is extra at the end of the day. So, but not a lot. Not, Sarah was very interesting. It's a whole different area of subject, but compared, to what we would have thought, there's not a lot of kind of intersectional cross working together with these groups that potentially feed a lot others or support students at a reduced price.
Yeah, I would just add that that's a very interesting topic because it's really about providing people with those options or making them aware that they're available, the consumer. And the restaurant operator has to, and by the consumer, I mean to pick up whatever is left over and distribute it that way. This is your area of expertise. So I think it's something worth exploring and interesting in terms of just awareness and coming up with better solutions so that people can access the food, and restaurant operators know more about where they can redistribute their waste.
Yeah, and it also engages sort of rules and regulations, local level, state level, or federal level about food. So those sort of safety and food policies, many restaurants just don't want to go down that path.
And I would just say in general, to answer from ReFed's perspective here, is that while donation is only about 1% to 2% of total surplus food in the US, there's a massive opportunity to increase that. We are seeing increased adoption across retail and food service in general. Now, that is not every concept, but there's many large organizations that are leading the way and helping build some of this infrastructure that's needed. There's a lot of also novel solutions of not only for example, these wonderful food delivery apps are innovating and trying to recover food from restaurants and get it to food recovery organizations. There's new apps and services for consumers to buy, what would have gone to waste at the end of the day from restaurants. There are many solutions that are out there in the marketplace and are starting to scale that really hopefully will continue to support the food recovery system in the US. which does an exceptionally job with limited resources and does a great job with a very, very, very large problem to solve. So
1000% I agree with you on that, Sarah. And I was quite surprised. It's so important.
Yeah, and we're also seeing on the flip side of that, increased composting. It is certainly community driven based off infrastructure, which is also another diversion tactic that, of course, we always want to prevent first, and that's where customized portions comes in. But then we want to move down that of how can we divert things to food recovery, then animal feed, and then compost. So continuing to work on that and tons of innovation again across the nation. Well, I am so excited. Again, I could talk to y'all for a whole day about this, but we are coming to the close. So I'm going to hold you to a sentence or two call to action. If you're talking to a restaurant operator, what's the standout stat or call to action that you would give to them? I'll start with you, Hui.
Yeah, I can start. I think in 2026, catering to and satisfying consumers is more about giving them tasty food. More and more operators should be considering about providing a holistic experience that meets all of their needs in a way that matches their life and their appetite and their value, their budget and their goals. And portion size and customizability is a great way to satisfy a lot of those core consumers' needs that are always evolving. So that's my takeaway.
Abby.
I think I have 2 sentences. I'll try to be brief. The first would be to see your operators to see their teams as change agents who can really reduce food waste. And with that, look in the bins front of house, right? Excuse me, look at the packaging waste, which was talked about here, but look at the food waste and let them guide the opportunities to create flexible portions that work for that restaurant.
Gina?
Gosh, good question. My big takeaway is really focused again on train your employees, work with your employees, use portion guides and measurable utensils, create very positive feedback loops that the employees will give you insight on what the customers are dumping into the trash can. And I think that creates, as what you were talking about, Sarah, a culture of innovation and ownership, and I think a much better team effort to deal with front of house food waste.
And Laura, over to you.
Yeah, my last takeaway here would be, I hope portion strategy is really one of the few levers that in food service where health, sustainability, and business performance align. What I hope restaurants take away from this is that portion strategy doesn't have to be reactive. With simple measurement and thoughtful customization, like we've talked about today, it becomes a proactive way to manage waste and to respond to customer demand and run a tighter operation without compromising the guest experience. So it's just a great strategy. We hope more operators adopt it.
Yeah, and Laura, I'm just going to double down on what you said and in my own words say that, this is about the triple bottom line. And whatever way you're coming to this issue, what we know is restaurant in terms are looking to drive traffic. They want to grow their business, right? They want to improve their margin. They want to optimize their labor, and they want to offer great tasting food that consumers love. And part of that is exactly what we said, is interweaving between that taste with all these other things that they value. And I think portion optimization is just one of those strategies and one of the very few strategies that actually delivers on all of that. And so thank you all very much for both sets of research. It's fascinating. I encourage everybody to download them, dig in. And thank you all to our panel. And thank you all for joining us today. Again, we'll send out that recording so you can share it with all your colleagues. Thank you all. Have a good day.